Listen up, fellow Democrats. Fight fake news and lies with facts. Save our democracy from right-wing hypocrisy. Keep our integrity, embrace our diversity. Whenever we're down, we always come back. So listen up, Democrats.
Hello, welcome to Progressive Oregon, a weekly engagement broad stream on progressive issues in Oregon. My name is Larry Taylor, and I'm here today with my co-host, Betsy Cunningham. If you would like to ask questions during the show, go to the YouTube and type in Uphill Media channel for the show and type in your questions, and Betsy will relay them to me, and we will do our best to answer them. Today, we will be giving a catch-up on what's been happening over the past month. Then we're going to be talking about the 10 county-level initiatives to protect the Second Amendment that happened around the state. This seemed to be news in the rural parts of Oregon, but not so much in where the major population centers are. So I wanted to just share with everyone what was going on during the election last year. We will talk about who was lining up to lead the Democratic Party of Oregon for the next 2 years. And then the last segment is on properly electing delegates. And what I'm doing is walking you through the math of how to properly elect delegates so that the delegates that should be elected are the ones that get elected. And then we'll briefly talk about upcoming events. So what's been happening? And this is the good news for the 56% of us who belong to the progressive camp of the Democratic Party. So where we are in the election cycle. In May of 2018, we elected the precinct committee persons for the subsequent 2 years. We are now in the middle section where we are having county elections and congressional district elections. And this is where we elect the delegates to the state central committee and the delegates to the congressional district committees. And it's the state central committee that elects the chair and the two vice chairs and the secretary at the reorganization meeting of the Democratic Party of Oregon coming up in March. Then a combination of the state central committee delegates and the congressional district delegates vote for the members of the 5 standing committees of the Democratic Party of Oregon, which the key ones are listed here: the Platform and Resolutions Committee, the Rules Committee, and the Credentials Committee. There's also the Events Committee, which arranges for events around the state, and the Budget Committee, which is active every 2 years in preparing the budget for the subsequent 2 years. But going to the next slide, the elections have been very exciting, and they're almost complete at the county level. Multnomah County has finished its 180-degree turnaround. At their reorganization, they had 234 precinct committee persons show up. They had to rent a large room at a hotel to have the event. And they have elected a really great set of officers and delegates from Multnomah County, which is a very large number of people. They get 20 delegates to the state central committee. The next largest county gets 11. If you put the 3 largest counties together, they have a voting block of a quarter of the delegates to the state central committee. Another great election happened in Jackson County this past week, where they also elected a really great slate of officers and delegates to the state central committee. For some reason, people think that Jackson County is part of the rural red Oregon, but it's not. It's actually a very progressive county, and we will see some evidence of that in our first presentation this morning when we talk about the gun initiatives. One thing to remember about the congressional district elections is that they're complicated when it comes to electing the members of the standing committees. In addition to the delegates to the congressional district committee, the state central committee members that live in the congressional district also get to vote. So in Multnomah County, almost all of the delegates get to vote for their delegates to the standing committees. For counties where multiple counties are split into 2 CDs, then they split up their congressional district. But it's actually twice as many delegates as you would think. And they should all show up at the reorganization and vote for the standing committee members. Next slide. We're getting some of the usual anti-democratic BS. So there's still some pockets within the Democratic Party of Oregon where we have to still make some improvements. The voting members of the this one congressional district are not being revealed to the people who want to run for offices, which prevent them from doing any kind of outreach. And as we know, when talking to someone is the best way to run a campaign, and they're being prevented from doing this, we're working on that to get that changed. We wish the DPO would step in and deal with this, because the congressional district committees are actually creations of the Democratic Party of Oregon, as opposed to the counties, which are completely separate entities. So this is the elections of the congressional districts is the responsibility of the Democratic Party of Oregon to make sure that they are run properly and cleanly and with transparency. The CD1 reorganization will happen on February 16th in Hillsborough. The second congressional district will probably be on the morning of the Democratic Party reorganization, which is March 17th, although no date has been set for that. The third congressional district will be on March 3rd, and the fourth congressional district will be on February 9th in Florence. So everyone has to gets a day at the beach to vote in that. And then the fifth congressional district is complete. The next is a recent quote that was on Pod Save America by John Favreau, but a number of people have said this previously. The solution to the ills of democracy is more democracy. And so that is what we need here in the state. We are retooling for 2020. We're revamping some of the organizations and how we're working together to get things done so that we can be more effective in the next 2 years. So we have 3 organizations. First of all, we have the Progressive Caucus, which will be made up of the progressive delegates and alternate delegates of the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party of Oregon. This is different than the previous incarnation, which was anyone who felt that they were a progressive. This is actually a voting bloc to work together to make things happen when we get together at the quarterly meetings. Then we have Advancement of Democracy, which is going to continue along. This is Democrats across the state who want to work on progressive issues. We need representatives from every county, because we don't necessarily have progressive State Central Committee delegates in every county. And we need a representative to go to the county organizations and present resolutions like the one that we will be bringing up very soon on making the van available to any Democrat running for office, not just the chosen ones of the Democratic Party of Oregon. And then we have the new coalition of progressive organizations that's just emerging called Justice Oregon, and that will be representatives from progressive groups across the state to achieve the items that were listed in FDR's Second Bill of Rights. If you are interested in any of these, you can contact me directly at my email address, which is at the bottom, lawrence.d.taylor@gmail.com, or you can go to advancementofdemocracy.org and sign up there. So we need representatives from across the state. If you would like to get involved with this, we would love to have you. So our first segment today is on guns and the pro-gun. And yes.
Larry, I think there's a question from Oz Lefebvre about, are they going to succeed in running it fairly considering the history of the DPO?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. We can only try. You know, we can either try or we can give up. Any other questions?
No, that's it.
So the next segment is on SAPO, the Second Amendment preservation ordinances that were fielded for the second time across Oregon in the November 2018 election. And today I have Susan Mesik from Douglas County joining me, which was a county that had one of these measures on the ballot. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, Larry. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. Okay.
So going to the next slide, what happened in last November, voters in 10 counties decided on Second Amendment preservation ordinances in the general election. 4 counties had previously passed similar ordinances, and these include, and these 4 were Coos, Curry, Wallowa, and Wheeler. And the ordinances state that county residents have the right to own semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazines, and the right to own firearms without any registration requirement. The ordinances would allow county sheriffs to decide whether state and federal gun laws are constitutional and prohibit the use of county resources to enforce any laws deemed unconstitutional. So, what do you think of your initiative you had, Susan?
Well, I think that it is ill advised because, let's face it, any federal law, anything in the Constitution is going to override state, county, city if you live in a city. I think that it was a dog whistle to all the conservatives to come and vote for this, and also for other things that they're really interested in, like no Oregon health plan and no abortion and the other measures like that were on the ballot last November. You spelled my first name wrong. It's Suzan. Just saying.
I always make one mistake in case to check that people are actually reading my slides. So thank you.
I will get
You win.
Well, I kind of have to. I'm sitting here, Anyway.
It's absolutely amazing that they got 10 initiatives on the ballot. I've worked on initiatives, and it's really tough collecting the signatures to get them on the ballot. How did they get it on the ballot in Douglas County?
Our county commissioners had it suggested to them by Tom McKiergan, and they talked among themselves, and then they had some public hearings, and then they put it on the ballot, which is all as per the Oregon Constitution and how the county can decide things.
Wow. So if we had a progressive majority in a county, we should be able to do the same thing across the state.
If your county commissioners are progressive, that Wheeler and Douglas are the 2 counties I found that put it on the ballot this way. The rest of them, it was through initiative petitions, and they rallied behind Tom McKiergan and Rob Taylor. There is an outfit called the Committee for the Second Amendment out of California, and I'm pretty sure they're organizing in other states. They are very right-wing, and of course the 3%ers and the Oath Keepers help too. So, and this is an issue people are very passionate about. So when people are very passionate about something, you can't get them out to get out and go get signatures.
Yeah, and all those names are on the next slide. Who sponsored the initiative? So in Oregon, it's the group called Committee to Protect the Second Amendment. As you said, the organization itself is run by Rob Taylor, and Tom McKiergan wrote the language that was copied in many of the initiatives. And yes, we thought that the activity of the Oath Keepers and the 3%ers had subsided, but they had just gone underground and have been working very effectively while we all thought that they were gone.
Yes, well, we were doing our own effective work. Yes, the 3%ers, the Oath Keepers, and the Committee for the Second Amendment, there is a lot of overlap in those 3 groups. So we might not be looking at 3 separate groups. We might be looking at like 1.5 or 2 groups as far as numbers go. But out here in the outback, people are still convinced Democrats are going to come and take their guns. And I would like to say as a Democrat that I'm not going to take your guns because I have my own.
So the next slide talks about their beliefs, which I think is very interesting. One quote that we got from him: "We don't have constitutional rights, we have constitutionally protected rights given by God. What no government has given, no man can take away. This is a quote from McKiergan. He said the Supreme Court is not the final arbiter of what's constitutional, which is an interesting perspective. And he said all they can do is opine. They can only give decisions and they cannot create law, which is true. Next slide. These were statewide gun control laws passed and proposed in the northern part of the state that are, he said that it's the statewide gun control laws passed and proposed in the northern part of the state that are radical and unconstitutional. And by northern, he really means northwestern because Wallowa is northern.
Yes.
He said the solution is to refuse to use county law enforcement or resources to enforce these laws. And this was a quote that you had found, Susan. Almost upon arriving in Douglas County, Mr. McKiergan constantly reminded the commissioners of their duty to do something more significant in their county. And that was from the Coos County Watchdog in June.
Yes, I thought that was very interesting. Our county commissioners are not the most transparent trio of overlords in the world, and they will listen to you if they agree with you, is my personal observation. Others might have a different experience, but they are all Republicans and they believe in this. When the occupation of the wildlife refuge in Malheur County was going on, one of them actually went down there in support. So these are county commissioners.
Great. The next slide is a picture of your county sheriff, which I thought was great. And we got the deer head hanging on the wall. And he looks quite a bit like our sheriff here in Clatsop County.
I think they have a ranch where they breed them, Larry.
That's funny.
They breed sheriffs.
Yep, that's Sheriff Hanlon. Yes, it is.
The next slide shows the effectiveness of their work, which is just jaw-dropping. So the fact that they gathered signatures on 8 of them is pretty amazing because that's really hard work and shows how organized they are. So out of the 10, they failed in 2 of the counties. And when I was first collecting this, I was finding the counties that were in, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. They tried Jackson and Lincoln County, which I thought were fairly progressive. It turns out that Jackson and Lincoln County were the 2 counties where the measures failed, and the others where they passed were Baker, Columbia, Douglas, Klamath, Lake, Lynn, Umatilla, and Union. So I was a little surprised at Lynn County because that's kind of, right next to some pretty blue counties.
Oh, no. Lynn's very red. Believe me, I live here.
My misconception.
Yeah.
Anyway, so good organizing, guys. You did well.
Everybody in the audience understands this is peak sarcasm, right? Because this is bad stuff. I just want to make sure, Larry, this is bad. I'm looking at this going, this is what we're supposed to be doing with our progressive legislation, everybody.
Couldn't we do this with national popular vote or healthcare for all or a number of issues? It would be just awesome if we could work together, which is what our vision is for the groups that I talked about for 2020.
Awesome. I have a question for Suzanne real quick.
Yeah.
And then, Betsy, I'm sorry, but Suzanne, you made a point earlier. You said you were a gun owner, so you're not going to take anybody's guns.
Exactly.
Do you feel threatened by any of the Oregon gun control measures?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Betsy, do we have any comments?
No, from me. Since I also live in Douglas County where Susan lives, that 73% yes is significant because that is not just all the rednecks who live among us. So, that is one thing I think that the Democratic Party needs to think about in organizing in rural areas. I think Susan is right. Our Douglas County commissioners have the legal authority just to pass the ordinance, but they chose to waste taxpayers' money to make a point. And I think that 73% is the point they were trying to make.
Yes, this passed in our county, Betsy, with the highest percentage of votes. 73.25 is what I found on the Oregon Secretary of State's website. And the closest one after that was, yes, Umatilla. So there's that. Oh, there's my name spelled properly. Thank you.
Modern technology,
So,
Susan.
There's our goal, our vision for the progressive movement. Be at least as effective as the Second Amendment people, because
Yes.
they're really they're outflanking us.
You could say that about the conservative party, the GOP, even the establishment Dems, is that they all have built their connections and they've got their processes down. And they know how to get this stuff done. We got to pick up our pace.
We have to be smarter.
They know how to close ranks when they need to, and we don't.
Yeah.
The next, any further questions on the line on that one, Betsy? Apparently not. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. You're more than welcome to hang in and comment on the rest of the show if you'd like to.
Oh, you know I will if I want to, Larry.
No stopping you.
No.
So the next segment is on who will lead the Democratic Party of Oregon. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the press release. This is the first time I remember such a formal press release being issued. So the Democratic Party is slowly becoming less of a priesthood than it used to be, and allowing more people to get involved. The history of the last 2 decades has been one of basically being ignored by the general rank and file Democrats. When I first got involved with the Democratic Party, the chair was Mark Abrams. He was the former chair of Multnomah County. And then after him was Jim Edmondson, who was the former chair of Lane County. And then he was replaced by 3 subsequent chairs who had never led a county party and seemed to bring this outside mentality of the chair being basically the CEO of the organization, telling everyone else what to do, as opposed to what the bylaws of the Democratic Party say, which is that the SCC, State Central Committee, is the governing body. And then we saw a slow evolution of the activities in the party, going from making any kind of substantive decisions when we got together at quarterly meetings to just voting on resolutions. And so this was a sort of duplicitous way of channeling all of the energy from the activists in the party into doing something that made them feel good, but actually didn't accomplish anything. So we have passed literally dozens of resolutions over the past couple of years, and I think it would be very difficult to point to any concrete results out of that. And what we have seen is that our powers as a decision-making body being siphoned off and not even directed to the executive committee, which is what the bylaws says is the body who takes care of things in between state central committee meetings. But all of the decisions have been moved to the admin committee, because that is a very small group of people basically under the control of the chair of the Democratic Party. If you read the bylaws, there's a line in there that says that the admin committee is responsible for policies and processes. But if you read the entire section, you can see that the admin committee was really designed to take care of HR issues with the Democratic Party of Oregon, which makes total sense. You want HR issues dealt with by a small group of people because you need confidentiality and respect for the privacy of the employees. But the intention originally was never to just hand everything over to this group, but that's what's happened. So now we are at a point where we can elect new leadership. As was noted in the press release, the chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon is not running for re-election. And so we have 4 positions that we will be electing on March 17th. Next slide, please. They are the chair, the first vice chair, the second vice chair, and the secretary. And the first 2 positions are fairly significant because the chair and the first vice chair are members of the Democratic National Committee. So they go to the quarterly meetings of the DNC and have the ability to participate in the decision-making of that organization. And they also belong to the Association of Chairs and Vice Chairs of the Democratic Party. which is also a group that has some level of influence of what goes on. In addition to the chair not running again, the first vice chair, which is Valdez Bravo, is sadly decided not to run for re-election, which means that the two top slots, well, two of the 4 slots will be wide open, and we have not heard what the other 2 candidates are doing yet. So we've been searching for an appropriate replacement for the current chair, and at this point, we are still searching. We had a number of people indicate that they would run, but to the best of my knowledge, no one has actually filed to run. The last date to file to run for one of these positions is February 20th, 2019, and the election, of course, will be on March 17th. And the location of the election will be at the Central High School in Monmouth, on Monmouth Street in Independence, Oregon. So this is going to be very cool. We're going to go to a town not far from where I was born in Oregon for the reorganization meeting.
Oh, I had no idea that was out this way. Wow, dang. Real quick, I just want to say this to everybody who's considering running for any kind of office in the DPO based on the election of the chair, the selection, the anointment, I should say, of the current chair, 2 years ago. There is absolutely 0 experience required. Okay? So you can run for any level in the DPO. You don't even have to know what the DPO stands for. All right? Any level. It's just open because it was open for Gene. Just letting everybody know. There we go. Move on, Larry. Thank you.
I'm trying to recover from that. Thank you, John.
You're very welcome.
So the 3 declared candidates that I am aware of are Sarah Spansale, who will be running for secretary, Pete Lee, who's running for one of the vice chair's positions, and Michelle Risher, who is also running for a vice chair position. Sarah and Pete were both Bernie Sanders delegates to the convention in 2016. And Michelle is the chair of the LGBT caucus, or the Stonewall caucus, as it's currently known, inside the Democratic Party of Oregon. And they'll all be great candidates. We don't know if the other vice chair or the secretary is running for a re-election. And what's really interesting is why we don't know who has filed for office. And if you don't want people to know that you filed for office, then don't file until the day before the filing deadline. Otherwise, this should be public information. When we have candidates file for office here in Clatsop County for sheriff and for city councils and county commissioners, and for any of the local elections, the elections clerk files the name of who's running, and it's public information, and they're perfectly transparent about this stuff. And so we got some mangled explanation, and I think it was about respecting privacy or some kind of stuff like that, on why we can't find out who's filed for these 4 offices. But what it really does is allow them to have a candidate that would really be odious to the membership, and then we get revealed who it is on February 21st, and because we've not done due diligence and fielded good candidates, that's who we end up getting stuck with. So that's the net effect of not knowing who's running. We've been told that they are now reconsidering the policy and they might be revealing who's running, but really, if you don't want anyone to know that you're running, just wait until the last day and file on the last day, and then it'll have the same net effect. And it would be great if the Democratic Party of Oregon would be transparent and open about elections. Go ahead, John.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you. I was just laughing. You didn't get to see it, but Susan was providing additional graphics in relation to the statement made about privacy. It was, here, Susan, you just, a visual aid.
I'm not live, am I?
Of course you are.
You are now.
Anyway, sorry, Larry. It was just fun.
Any questions on the upcoming reorganization, Betsy?
No.
Yeah, we would really like someone with, the ideal candidate would be, like we used to have, someone who's had experience at a county organization so they understand the issues that counties face. We haven't had that in over a decade. And of course, someone who has at least passing familiarity with parliamentary procedure, so they're not completely dependent upon the parliamentarian for everything that they do. And then someone who understands their role as chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon, which is really channeling the will of the State Central Committee instead of thinking that they impose their will upon a State Central Committee. One of the most powerful things that they're allowed to do is appoint chairs and vice chairs and an additional member to each of the standing committees. And in the Rules Committee, what that means is that they ultimately get 5 members they get to appoint to a board that's only 15 members to start with. They also get to appoint, the chair of the committee also gets to appoint their own representative. So it takes 10 people to get something passed in agreement. The Platform and Resolutions Committee is a bit larger, and so it's a little bit more diluted there. But we found out this last time that unless you have chairs of the committees, just like it takes a chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon to understand their role as a facilitator of the group and channeling the will of the group, you end up just fighting them tooth and nail, and it's really difficult to make any sort of progress. Alrighty, well, that's what's coming up. If you're a State Central Committee delegate, please make sure that your calendar is marked for March 17th so you can go to Independence, Oregon, and vote for our upcoming leadership. The final segment is on properly electing delegates. We currently have many counties and committees follow a process whereby if you have delegates and alternate delegates, they just vote them in one big list, and then they take the top vote getters to be the delegates, and the next set of slots to be alternate delegates, and they call it good. We watched this happen 2 years ago, and we were puzzled about how some of the alternate delegates ended up winning, and it took me a long time thinking through this process to understand why this isn't actually a democratic process. And then I was talking with one of the professional parliamentarians, and she said, well, they really should be voted on different ballots. And then I started thinking about what that would do and how it would actually fix this problem. And so what this presentation is a walkthrough of the math of the two processes to illustrate why you need to vote them on separate ballots. So the basic principle of decision in a deliberative assembly is that to become an act or choice of the body, a proposition must be adopted by a majority vote. That is, direct approval must be registered by more than half of the members present and voting on the particular matter in a regular or properly called meeting of the assembly. And for this topic, it is the election. And as I said, one commonly used procedure that violates this principle is the election of delegates and alternate delegates together rather than on separate ballots. Next slide. Why is this a violation? It's because this process allows alternate delegates to be elected that are not the choice of the majority. So my first example is let's assume that that a group has to elect 3 delegates and 3 alternate delegates, and that the group has 21 members, and they're divided into 2 camps. We have the Team Gleek, and they have 12 members, and they're supporting candidates A, B, C, D, E, and F. And then we have Team Nerd, which has 9 members, and they're supporting candidates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, Team Gleek has a majority, so you think that they would be able to get their choice. The voting rules for one ballot is typically each member has 3 votes because there's three slots, delegate slots to be filled. Delegates and alternate delegates are elected on one ballot, and the winners are the candidates that receive the most votes. So this is how it typically happens. The 3 top vote getters in this instance would be the delegates, and the next 3 would be the alternate delegates. And if there's anyone left over, then they don't get any slots. So the next slide shows the voting results if we did the one ballot process. So assuming party line voting, candidate A, B, and C would each get 12 votes each because Team Gleek had 12 votes. but they've expended all their votes. And so the rest of the votes would be done by Team Nerd, which has 9, and then they would cast them for the alternate delegates that were their choice, which was candidates 1, 2, and 3. The next slide shows as analysis of what happened. Team Gleek elected their 3 delegates, but because they exhausted their vote, they had no votes for the alternate delegates. Team Nerd elected their preferred candidates. And so any meeting in which a Team Gleek delegate is unable to attend, they're replaced by someone from Team Nerd. And if you get an instance where all 3 delegates are unable to attend, then all 3 representatives come from Team Nerd, which is not what the majority would like to have had happen. So I hope that's clear. Now we'll go through the same process, but using 2 ballots. And this is the preferred method using a majority vote. And this, of course, is not recognizing that there is alternate ways of voting, like preferential voting, which kind of addresses this in a different way. So again, the voting rules on 2 ballots is that each member has 3 votes. Delegates and alternate delegates are elected on separate ballots, and the winners of the candidates are the receive the most votes on each of the ballots. So the next slide shows the voting results with 2 ballots. So on the delegate ballot, we again have candidate A, B, and C getting 12 votes from their team, and candidates 1, 2, and 3 from the minority get 9 votes each. So the delegates are candidates A, B, and C. And then on the alternate delegate ballot, we have candidate D, E, and F, all receiving 12 votes, and candidates 1, 2, and 3 running for those slots because they didn't get the delegate slots, trying again, getting 9 votes each. So the next slide shows the difference in the results, if it wasn't obvious from what we just said. So on the left side is the set of alternates and regular delegates from voting on 1 ballot, which is candidates A, B, C, and candidates 1, 2, and 3. And then the results from 2 ballots on the right side shows what the majority chose, which is candidates A, B, C, D, E, and F, which is what the majority of this assembly wished for. So, summary of this process. You can't curtail the rights of the assembly without special rules or having it written into the bylaws. And having a rule where they're all voted on one ballot is actually a curtailment of rights. And so if they're in the bylaws, you need to alter the bylaws, or if they're in the special rules, you need to change the special rules. Or if they're in standing rules, you need to suspend the standing rules or get them changed. The thing to remember about changing them is that bylaws are approved by a 2/3 vote and cannot be suspended for things like this. So you actually have to change the bylaws if this is a process that they wrote into the bylaws. If they are special rules, they also must be approved by a 2/3 vote and require 2/3 vote for suspension. Again, it would be better just to change these special rules so that the voting is done on 2 ballots. And then standing rules cannot curtail rights, so they're actually invalid if they show up on the standing rules anyway. But if they are in the standing rules and you find this happening in an upcoming election, you can move to suspend them. So the next slide is where I actually talk about what you can do. As I said, standing rules requiring 1 ballot are not valid and can be challenged by raising a point of order and a motion to have separate ballots. If you have special rules that require 1 ballot, you should move to suspend the special rules and then move to have separate ballots. And then if the bylaws require them to be on 1 ballot, you should change the bylaws. Next slide, you will say, well, why don't we just give the delegates 6 votes because there are 6 slots to vote for. Alternate delegates need to be elected in an order so that there's clarity on which alternate delegate is chosen to replace the delegate. And certainly in smaller assemblies, what you end up is a lot of people with the same number of votes. And so you don't get an order resulting from it. And there's also should be provisions for resolving tie votes, but a better way is just to have them on 2 ballots, and then there's no ambiguity about the order in which they're elected, or who the majority chooses to be the delegates or the alternate delegates. So if you have any questions about this, you're more than welcome to contact me, and I can give you the slide deck. I'm going to post the slide deck at advancementofdemocracy.org, so you can take it and demonstrate to people in your organization why one ballot doesn't work. Do we have any questions on this topic, Betsy?
Well, Charles says our county rules committee said that standing rules cannot be suspended. So obviously you would. So maybe what can you do about it if that
Well, I mean, you need a parliamentarian who understands what the rules are. I mean, I go to meetings all the time where I hear chairs go through things which are just not accurate. Standing rules we like standing rules because they can be suspended. They're rules that govern procedure and you follow them, but once in a while it makes sense to suspend them, and all it takes to suspend a standing rule is a majority vote.
I find this, it's like amazing that you're saying this, because you taught us all this with the whole Standing Rule 13, and that was why it wasn't something that everybody needed to freak out about, is because it could be overturned with a 2/3 vote. Can Charles,
or a majority vote.
What could Charles take on a piece of paper that would prove this and what has this written down for him?
11th edition of Robert's Rules of Order.
Where does it say in the DPO that that's what they rely on?
At the end of the bylaws, it says that the parliamentary authority is Robert's Rules of Order, whatever the latest edition is. And if you want to, and like I was saying earlier, if you have actually chosen to curtail the rights of the membership, then that is a special rule which requires a 2/3 vote. So for instance, if you want to say, we don't want to give everyone the default for speaking twice for 10 minutes, we want to change the speaking, which is everyone's right under parliamentary procedure, and we want to make it 5 minutes, no more than 3 times. It takes a special rule for that, and they're kept separate from the standing rules. But special rules require 2/3 and can be suspended. Standing rules only require a majority to suspend, and bylaws in general cannot be suspended, with 2 exceptions. If the bylaw itself provides for its suspension, that's okay. And we actually have an instance of that in the DPO bylaws. Or if they are of a nature of a standing rule, then they can be suspended. Because sometimes people put things inside bylaws that are really not supposed to be there. And so an argument could be made that even though they're the bylaws, they're really not the nature of a bylaw, and so they can be suspended. But I would find a parliamentarian to help you walk through that. Other questions?
I don't see any other questions, but Pat Hacker says, all this sounds to me like making the system so complicated, most people don't want to take part.
That is one of the problems with democracy, but it's because, like with any rule, you find, it's like the IRS code around nonprofits. The code just goes on for pages and pages, and there's so many exceptions that there have been laws written for, because there's been so many ways people have tried to wiggle out of following the law, and so they just pass a bunch of laws. And so what the 11th edition of Robert's Rules of Order is the 11th attempt at achieving perfection of democracy, so that everyone is able to maintain their rights, but they can function. And so it's unfortunate that they are as complicated as they are, but that's what we've evolved to after 400 years of thinking about it.
One of the solutions was the people who lead meetings and run the organization know them well enough and follow them. Then the rest of us wouldn't have to worry about it.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Or you have to do what we're doing, which is getting a bunch of jujitsu parliamentarian experts geared up on this stuff. So when we go into meetings, we know when we're getting screwed by the leadership, and we're going to push back. And so this, an example of this happened at a previous state central committee meeting where someone tried to debate a motion that was undebatable, And fortunately, we had Keith Haxton who caught it and made a point of order and said, no, we can't debate that. That motion that was made is undebatable. And so that person who tried to stall consideration of a resolution was shut down, and we were able to vote on it and pass it. And it was actually a fairly important resolution. So, yeah, there you go. Please join us in the National Association of Parliamentarians and become parliamentarian judo experts.
Ninja parliamentarians.
Any other comments?
I just want to tell Pat, I agree with you absolutely that it's complicated, but I think we find it complicated because as citizens of the United States, at least my generation, we were not raised to understand democracy, to participate in it, we've just not been taught that. And I think if we'd been raised from, our education process that had included to be a good citizen, you got to do democracy, we'd all be having no problems here. We probably wouldn't be here.
And the thing that I've learned most out of studying this stuff is what my rights are. And so I can now better stand up for my rights in a democracy. And I wish everyone would get themselves to that level, because what I see happen so often is that people just sit there and they take direction from the leadership and they do what they're told, which might or might not be the right thing to do. So we're now being told by the leadership of the Democratic Party that they have a policy that all Democratic candidates cannot be treated equally and fairly in using the VAN database. And it wasn't until recently that number one, we were able to get this policy in writing so we could even debate it. And you would think that something like this would set everyone's hair on fire, but we're finding people who think that the policy of the establishment needs to be maintained. I mean, if I was the chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon and I saw a policy like that, that would be one of the first things I'd try to change, because to me it's obvious what the fair and equal thing to do is. It's just obvious to me. I don't know why it's not obvious to more people.
Well, you weren't elected to maintain establishment party line, Larry. Okay.
That's right. So, any other comments, or shall we move to upcoming events?
Nope.
All righty. So again, on February 9th is the 4th CD election in Florence, Oregon. All of you members of the 4th Congressional District, please go elect good delegates to the standing committees. February 11th is the first day to file for local elections across the state. February 16th is the first CD election at the Coyote Bar and Grill in Hillsborough. March 3rd is the 3rd Congressional District election. Excuse me. Again, on March 17th is the Democratic Party of Oregon reorganization meeting. March 21st, soon after that, is the last day to file for candidates. So as we are going through the process of electing new leadership of the Democratic Party of Oregon, hopefully all of the counties are consumed with the process of fielding candidates to run for local offices, because this is how we develop our farm team. March 25th is the due date for voters' pamphlet statements. It is really difficult to win if you do not have your picture and a blurb about you in the voters' pamphlet. April 30th is the voter registration deadline for the May 2019 election. Ballots will be mailed on May 1st, and the election is May 21st. So that's when ballots are due at 8 o'clock on May 21st. We've talked about previously how to check to see what positions are up for election. If you have a county elections office that's on the ball, the processes will be, and positions will be posted there. If that's not, then it would require a trip to your county elections office to find out what's going on. Any closing comments, John, Betsy, Susan?
No, not unless there's any more questions. One last thing. I am the vice chair of the Gun Owners Caucus of the Democratic Party of Oregon. We advocate for responsible gun ownership and gun safety. And that can mean different things to different people, but probably because the word gun control has been so poorly used by our adversaries in the political arena, shall we say. But yes, the Gun Owners Caucus of the Democratic Party of Oregon is always looking for new members. So contact me or Larry.
Or Charles, who I believe is still the chair, right?
Yes, or Charles, who was still the chair.
Yeah, Charles was on our show today. So Charles Mon is the chair of the Gun Owners Caucus. And I was going to mention that and I forgot to. So thank you for bringing that up. The Democratic Party is fine with people owning guns. And we have a Gun Owners Caucus, and we would be delighted if more people would get involved with the Gun Owners Caucus to advocate for sensible gun laws.
Hi, Charles.
Next slide, how to get involved with the Democratic Party or the advancement of democracy. So if you would like to get involved, please go to Advancement of Democracy and click the join button. We do need donations here at Uphill Media. So if you would like to see the continuation of this show and all the other great shows that John does, we would love to have donations, and we exist upon small donations. I think our average donation size is probably $5. Donate.uphillmedia.org. And that's it for today's show. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Larry.
And thank you for being with us today.
Well done. I'm gonna put this on screen. Here. No, we don't have a screen. Hang on. I had a thing ready, but you ended quick. Sorry, it's all my fault. Thank you for being here, everybody. We're going out with Greta Thunberg because she just keeps cranking out these amazing speeches, and I want you to hear this one because it's worth listening to. It's she basically calls it out, and I know we're thinking about we're thinking about what's going on right here in Oregon, and we're dealing with very localized problems, but the problem of climate change is pretty much the problem. And I just want to bring everybody's attention back to that. And the reason why we're working so hard in our democracy to put decent people in power is because we kind of like to live. And we have a very little time to fix things. And so I'm just going to run this clip here and just listen to Greta. This is a 16-year-old girl talking to the elite. And I just want to tell everybody, she's been doing this for a while now. She has not received one iota of response from the elite. They haven't done a thing. So we got to take power to fix this. Listen to the words of Greta Thunberg.
Our house is on fire. I am here to say our house is on fire. According to the IPCC, we are less than 12 years away from not being able to undo our mistakes. At places like Davos, people like to tell success stories, but their financial success has come with an unthinkable price tag. And on climate change, we have to acknowledge that we have failed. All political movements in their present form have done so. And the media has failed to create broad public awareness. But Homo sapiens have not yet failed. Yes, we are failing, but there is still time to turn everything around. We can still fix this. We still have everything in our own hands. Now is the time to speak clearly. Solving the climate crisis is the greatest and most complex challenge that Homo sapiens have ever faced. The main solution, however, is so simple that even a small child can understand it. We have to stop the emissions of greenhouse gases. And either we do that or we don't. You say nothing in life is black or white, but that is a lie, a very dangerous lie. Either we prevent a 1.5 degree of warming or we don't. Either we avoid setting off that irreversible chain reaction beyond human control or we don't. Either we choose to go on as a civilization or we don't. That is as black or white as it gets. We must change almost everything in our current societies. The bigger your carbon footprint is, the bigger your moral duty. The bigger your platform, the bigger your responsibility. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as if you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house was on fire. Because it is.